I promise you, it would probably be easier for me to sell petrol than to radio.
Andries Malherbe, he is the co-founder of Zero Carbon Charging.
It wasn't so much what that would look like. It turned out that the alternative was so much worse.
Michael, welcome back. How difficult has it been for both of you to actually get penalized for reporting an electric vehicle?
Literally, in the next 6 years, it's going to go from 100% to 100%. And we could miss out because we are not moving quickly enough.
Cool, guys, welcome. Thank you for giving me your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Michael, welcome back. Andries,
Thank you.
If you could give us maybe a quick introduction on firstly who you are, and then we can dive a bit more into your business.
Yes, I've been in renewable energy for the last decade, mainly developing large solar and wind farms and some small projects. And about 2 years ago, my partner called me and said we should look at EV charging, and we started the process to figure out how it works, how it could work. Really looking from we had been involved in various parts of the car industry, but we weren't really car guys. But we were quite in tune with what was happening energy-wise. So we'd look at it as an energy play. So we said, okay, could you use renewables to charge a car, and what would that look like? And it turned out that it wasn't so much what that would look like. It turned out that the alternative was so much worse. So we were worried about the fact that there were some charging companies out there. But then we found out that they were all grid tied, and one day, I'll never forget this. One day I found out. When you start a business, you're trying to build a business case, and Michael will know, you try and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And one day we did some research, and I discovered that if you charged off the grid, you had a worse carbon footprint than a petrol car. And it was like a light went on. So that was the first thing. But green doesn't necessarily sell. It's a nice to have, but there are very few places in the world where that's like a prerogative where you have to solve that problem. But what we did figure out was that the one thing that solar gives you is it gives you theoretically unlimited power. So no matter how fast the charger is, you can always build enough solar within reason to give enough power to charge a charger at almost any speed that you want. But if you charge off the grid, you are really limited to what the grid will give you at that point in time. And once we realized that we were onto something. And then it was really a case of applying what we knew, which was signing up land and permitting the land, because you have to go through a very exhaustive process to put up any kind of renewable facility almost anywhere. I mean, it's actually, one of our topics is what is it like to do this, and what are the obstacles, and what are the obstacles? Michael will also tell you is it's astonishingly hard to do the right thing. So you want to do clean power? Boy, do they make it hard for you. You would think that, I promise you, it would probably be easier for me to sell petrol than to generate clean. You know what I'm saying? There's a complete mismatch. But we've said about that, we've signed up 115 sites now all over the country, car sites, and we have signed up probably about 40 truck sites. And in both cases, our goal is 120 of each, which will give us national coverage. And we're now sitting about permitting them. We have about 15 completely approved sites. We can start to build as soon as we can get the plans approved. So we're on our way. So we're working with a whole bunch of national and regional government institutions, working with a whole bunch of investors, and slowly but surely we're going to build out our business.
And before unpacking that business, you mentioned is that the South African government, where those early challenges arose from?
It's not. No, we engage mostly with provincial and local government. We actually find the national government very helpful and very interested in the project, but local government are compelled to follow a certain set of rules, and the rules are often contradictory. They don't. Different departments' rules are often in conflict. For example, I'll give you an example. If you want to in the Western Cape, for example, it's almost impossible to get agricultural land permitted for anything but agricultural use. But it's also impossible to get pristine land permitted for any kind of use. So the one is the Department of Agriculture, the other is the Department of Environment. So between the two of them, it's very, very hard to do any kind of renewable energy in the Western Cape because they kind of block out almost all the land that there is between the two of them. So because their things don't speak to each other, it makes it very hard to get some of these things done.
In terms of regulation, how difficult has it been for both of you in provincial and the national level to start and move forward?
Yeah, on our side, regulations hasn't been that prohibitive because, again, I think with Zimi, we're a bit more on the private side, so working with fleets to help them transition to EVs. So for them, it's like mainly building regulations. It's things like electrical conformance board regulations on installations. I think you've had to deal with a much more bigger set of regulations with regards to your sites being larger, doing things like EIAs and things like that. So I think, Andries can maybe elaborate a bit more on that.
I mean, our challenge is not with the charging side. Our challenge is because we're generating energy. So the moment you start generating your own energy, you fall onto a whole host of different, all very serious, all very well thought out, all very well meant, but they become. I mean, if you were, I always say the problem with regulation is that it doesn't help the people it's supposed to help. So if you're a young person in this country, to start a business where you need any kind of permission is almost impossible. So what it does is it strengthens the status quo instead of attacking the status quo. So people say, why aren't we transforming our economy? Well, because specifically this government, but really this government for the last 30 years, 26 years, has taken on almost a European regulatory model. But the effect of that model is to entrench vested interests. It doesn't mean to do it, but the effect of it is to do it. So, for example, if you start a business, it is impossible to get VAT registered. It's not possible. That means everything you do costs 15% more than it should. So it's that kind of thing that is really, it's that kind of thing that makes it very hard to start new businesses and unnecessarily difficult, for example, to promote a business that promotes climate change, because you by definition need a lot of approvals, and there's no discount for doing something good. In fact, there's maybe a penalty for doing something good because it's new, it's different, it doesn't really fit so well. So we spend probably half our time of the entire management team goes into permits and consents.
Something that has a bigger effect, I think, industry-wide for us also that's quite prohibitive is the import taxes. So if you think of just EVs in general in South Africa, if you think of markets like Europe and Scandinavia, where there's been massive uptick, there's usually government incentives giving you some form of a tax subsidy to buy an EV, right? Because it helps promote sustainability, it helps them reach sustainability targets, good for the environment, good for the country, good for the economy. But in South Africa, there's additional taxes. So you actually get penalized for importing an electric vehicle, and even an additional tax, like on the luxury tax, above 650,000 rand per vehicle. So what that's meant for EV importers is that they're apprehensive to enter the market because they know it's going to come in at a higher price point. There's not going to be such high consumer demand, preventing them, specifically for us, for the fleets, getting more models available. So getting more vehicle types, more brands, etc. into the market is really critical. So that's something where regulation, but I know there's been some movements now with the white paper that's been released. It's been signed by cabinet. So I think that's a good forward momentum. But again, I think right now it's a bit prohibitive for growth.
The inherent weakness in the white paper is that it reminds me of the days of fixed telephony. When before markets deregulated, or when markets deregulated, people would try and maintain their market share and keep prices high. So my partner was in China now for 3 weeks, end of November, beginning of December, and there are a couple of hundred electric vehicle manufacturers in China, all of whom sit with surplus capacity. So the Chinese model is to do with electric cars exactly as they did with solar panels, and the solar panels prices just went like that, right? So if you have a couple of hundred EV manufacturers with excess capacity, they can, for relatively little marginal cost, put out a whole bunch of cars. And so now so the problem with the white paper is that it's maintaining high prices, and you can't ever protect a market with high prices, because somebody in a free market, somebody will come underneath you for whatever reason. So I think I think what the problem is that, you know, in incumbent motor manufacturer, you're trying to protect your ICE vehicles and vehicle manufacturer, even though your market is disappearing in front of your eyes overseas, but that's another story. And they don't really want the government to give price incentives for EVs. So all that means is that it's keeping car prices artificially high, and somebody's going to come in and, because for an electric car, very often, if you distinguish between the cost of the car and the taxes are far more than half the price of the car. So the car is inherently quite cheap. So I think the problems with that is that we're going to open our market to cheaper imports, and it's going to put tremendous pressure on the incumbent manufacturers, and I think they are eventually going to be pushed into a corner. You know that something like 8 or 10% of cars sold worldwide are made by people who never made cars before. So that is a tremendous revolution in how cars are made, and I mean, I can give you 5 examples of areas in the world that are now in serious trouble because they missed the boat on electric cars. Slovakia and the Czech Republic is the largest manufacturer of cars per capita in the world, which is astonishing actually. And they've simply missed out, and they have now lost business to Poland. They've lost business to countries around them just because they didn't get on this. And we could be in the same position if we're not careful.
So what does it take for those manufacturers to transition into EV?
Well, you see, the way that the car industry is set up in South Africa is really very clever. Is that they were encouraged to produce cars in the country. A lot of those cars are exported. A lot of those cars are exported to right-hand drive markets, but they got a tax credit for every car that was made and sold here. And they could apply those tax credits to imported cars. So although we have a tremendous number of imports, a lot of those imports are associated with people who either make parts or cars in the country, and they then offset the taxes with that, and that's how they keep prices affordable. There are a couple of importers that can't do that, and they're very, very sensitive to the rand exchange rate. But the issue is that they should be moving far more quickly in making electric cars here, which would allow them to sell those cars and import other cars, or they should be allowed to apply the incentives they make out of other cars to electric cars, and bring, because our risk as a country is that. I'll give you an example. The UK supposedly moved the end of the sale of ICE cars from 2030 to 2035, but they actually didn't quite do that. You have to move every couple of years. That you have to even this year, 20% of the cars that are sold in the UK has to be pollution free. Has to be carbon neutral, and by 2030 that's 80%. So of the cars that are made here, roughly 45% are right-hand drive, and of those 45%, 80% go to the UK. So that's a massive market for us. So that market literally is in the next 6 years is going to go from 100% to 20%, and we could miss out because we are not moving quickly enough. So I think the government could be more supportive in incentivizing people to buy electric cars. The government could also be more supportive in driving charging off-grid, and I'm not talking about commercials, I'm talking about private cars, and either incentivizing people that will make it easier for it to happen. But all around, basically I have the sense that we're playing for time, and if we play for time, it's the incumbent manufacturers who are going to suffer the most in the long term, and it's our economy that's going to suffer the most in the long term.
I think also just to add to that, I think from an engineering perspective, if you're thinking of a manufacturer sitting in a place like East London or in Port Elizabeth, they have to put a large amount of investment in things like supply chain, right? If you think of a vehicle, an electric vehicle, two of the biggest components are the battery pack and the electric drivetrain, right? So that's an entire reconfiguration of how they do assembly, how they actually put the vehicle together, how they source materials, and how they get it here. So if you think of a manufacturer, for example, that doesn't have the availability of, let's say, good battery tech or battery suppliers locally, or an easy way to do imports from other countries that produce those parts, it becomes quite a big hurdle for them to actually put that up and put that investment down, especially if there's like a prohibitive environment for EVs in the local market, right? Because they're also selling in the local market, so they want to support that. It just has a big ripple effect, right, in terms of how they make their investment decisions. So in terms of like actually retrofitting those plants to do EVs, it does take quite a sizable amount of money. And again, if there's other countries that are more favorable for that, they just reposition their manufacturing there, right? Also, if you think in terms of logistics, if they're selling most vehicles in places like Europe or America, it might make more sense to go and invest in their EV manufacturing capabilities in those countries, right? Because again, you're cutting down on costs because your supply chain is closer or geolocated to closer to your market, right? So all of those things have an effect.
And in terms of that public-private relationship, what needs to happen for there to be cohesion and essentially work towards the same goal?
That's a difficult question. I think in South Africa, collaboration for me is always a key thing, right? So bringing all the stakeholders together, and whose role is that really? Like, is that the government's role? Is that private industry's role? Is that non-profit's role? Where does that actually lie? So I think, again, collaboration and again, communication around what are the opportunities, what are the threats. But I think some really progressive leadership in government is definitely necessary to help move things forward, right? You need the Department of Science Technology working together with the Department of you were working with the Department of Agriculture and Land, etc., to get things moving forward on the renewable side. So I think there's a lot of collaboration and communication that might not necessarily be happening. I don't know, Andries, if you share that view.
Yeah, I think it's not. I think the problem is that it's not seen as a priority. Although transport makes up more than 12% of our carbon emissions, there's a reluctance to engage with us, although it's relatively easy to do it, and it would be quite easy for the government and for the manufacturers, by the way, to get involved in setting up charging networks. And I think they should do that, but when you talk to them, they say, no, that's not our business. Like petrol's not our business. But if electric vehicle manufacture is going to be so important for them, it would be better for them. The cost of setting up charging stations, Michael will tell you, is a fraction of what they're investing and making out of cars, because cars are so expensive. So it makes absolute sense for them to do that. But for some reason they are reluctant, and I think that ultimately, I think there's a specific dynamic in the South African market. I think you have to understand that Toyota is the market leader. And Toyota, until recently, has been a bit of a climate denier in terms of cars. They said they're acknowledging us. They built petrol-driven hybrids. They were looking at hydrogen cars. They were doing all kinds of stuff, but they weren't really focused on electric. So the problem is, if Toyota doesn't move, then Volkswagen won't move. And if Volkswagen doesn't move, then the next biggest manufacturer won't move. And the motor industry is notoriously designed or notoriously around quarter to quarter. So they think about next quarter sales, next quarter sales, next quarter sales. This requires them to look 4 or 5 years down the road, and for reasons which I don't completely understand, they are not really showing the leadership they should show because electric cars are ultimately cheaper to make. That means they should be cheaper to sell. It actually means that more people get mobile, not fewer people, which is the hit against electric cars that it's only for wealthy people. But if you actually had India is one of the leaders in electric cars, and their cars are some of the best and the cheapest in the world. So in India already, 2.4% of the car market is electric of annual sales, which is a phenomenal number. And once you're 2.4, it's not long before you're at 5, and 5 is a tipping point. So then you're off. And the other big thing to remember about electric cars is that Michael will tell you, we buy something like 300 billion rands worth of a petroleum product from other countries. If we electrify transport completely, it would be a massive forex saving for the country. It would strengthen the rand. All that energy would be made locally. It's a huge localization of energy. It's actually phenomenally important to us to do that.
Mm.
And it's a once-in-a-life opportunity to take all of that back from the rest of the world. And we should be grabbing. We should be much more. The last thing I will say to you is that it's now completely accepted fact that investment in green industry is very profitable and is very big. And if you think that there's nothing more than we need more jobs, we need more economic activity, we need more investment. The whole green economy is a wonderful opportunity for us to do that. And it's a sad thing that we're not doing more about it.
Look, I'm still quite positive, specifically from the infrastructure perspective and the history of what's happened in the past, let's say 5 to 10 years in solar, right? So, you know, we're in a situation in this country where there's a massive demand for energy but low supply. So private players stepped in, right? Like if you look at home solar companies, CNI solar companies, they've stepped in to fill that gap. So it was actually a wonderful entrepreneurial gap that was filled by the private sector.
Absolutely.
And for both of us, I think we've also seen that gap in the infrastructure for charging, right, and for EVs. So seeing that there is this gap, it seems like there's not enough movement. Like we're going to start ventures, we're going to push this forward. And I think it's just a wonderful opportunity. So yeah, very bullish on EVs.
And speaking about those opportunities for both your companies, so how do both your players, being these front runners in the market, collaborate and actually solve the problem?
I think maybe I can start with like what we do and how we work with fleets. So at Zimi, we work with fleets in logistics, delivery, and tech services to help transition to electric vehicles. So we do this in a couple of ways. We actually help them understand exactly what vehicles are in the market and give them real-life performance data so they know exactly what to expect when making that buying decision. We also help them plan and place private charging stations. So at their locations, any location they operate, if it's their depots or their offices, actually installing charging stations and running demos with EVs, right? So they can get their hands on them and get to feel how they drive, what their distance looks like, if they fit into like a fit for use case for the type of work that they're doing. And then after that, we help them scale the infrastructure across their locations and help them track and manage energy and carbon and payments. And we're very much, if you think of the market of EVs, there's like this consumer market and commercial market, and we very much play in the commercial market, where I think Andries, you play definitely more in the consumer side.
I think it is a very positive story. I think that I think the opportunities around electrification of transport is phenomenal. I think buses are going to go electric. I think taxi and in those markets, what's really phenomenal about it is the cars and the buses and the minivans are idle exactly when the sun is shining. So they work early in the morning and late in the afternoon, and they largely stand still in the middle of the day. So there's a wonderful opportunity to charge them with renewables during that period, not even using batteries, just using solar panels, for example. So there's all kinds of spin-offs like that. But the opportunity for us and for Zimi Charge really is to co-promote this, because it's still such a new idea that the fact that he's out there, that Zimi's out there, is good. We can say, well, Zimi's out there, and Zimi can say, well, zero carbon charge is out there, and you know, so that's a very important psychological. You are actually the only person doing something. People think you're strange. I mean, I think hydrogen.
That's very true, eh?
And I think hydrogen is there at the moment, where there are just actually too few people punting it, and the people punted are the people just making it. So there's no one actually using it. Whereas there's now enough. You know, I mean, Michael, it's amazing. Every day, every week, I see more electric cars. Like, you know, and I see more different kinds of models. And you know, there's a little rental agency in Cape Town. Unfortunately, the name I don't know, but they have 24 or 28 rental cars, full electric cars, and they are booked out every day. And when we talk to fund managers now, for example, they'll say, well, you know, this space, somebody's in that space, and I'll say, but you know, we see that companies with European heritage are much more adamant about net zero than South African companies. He said, no, it's completely wrong. He said, I'm investing in South African companies, but I have European investors, and they demand that I turn my business green, and the businesses are investing green. So there's an example of there's tremendous strong leadership from Europe to the detriment of their own motor industry to drive this net zero idea, and it makes a big difference. So I think that one thing that we can do is to work on the powers that be to convince them that's in their interest and in the country's interest to actually drive the greening of the economy far more aggressively.
Yeah, definitely. I think also as we look at fleets transitioning, we're starting out to see in this urban market where the vehicle ranges are really applicable at the moment, right? So where you can comfortably do 150 or 200 kilometers a day with a delivery vehicle or a tech services vehicle. That's definitely going to be spreading cross country, right? Regional, intercity, etc., which is a lot of your focus with your stations right now, which for us is such a wonderful future market, because as the battery tech's developing, as the vehicles, as the regulations that we spoke of become more progressive, as the vehicle models get released, that's very much the next market that we're going to be focusing on. And having the ability, as you said, to be able to co-promote and say, well, look, there are players in this market that are putting up charging stations, that are going to be available publicly. We are going to help roaming and facilitate payments and things like that. It also gives our customers confidence that when they make that investment decision to now start switching their EVs over, it's got momentum. It's moving in that direction.
It's an end-to-end solution.
100%. And very true to what you said on the sustainability pressures from Europe, we've seen a lot of the organizations that we've been talking to in South Africa, their holding company, etc., might be in the UK, might be in Germany. They have sustainability mandates that they have to switch their fleet over to EVs when there's available models. So the pressures might not be coming from our government, from our regulatory framework, but it is coming from head office HQ in London, because they have to drive sustainability targets for their organization. So that's also quite a good thing.
And you mentioned the rental company. What prevents a company like Hertz, who does have an international footprint, here in South Africa to not change their fleet to EV?
The lack of a national charging network. So that's a gap that we're trying to fill. Is that we want to offer a product that is very close to what you would have as a petrol car. So that you stop somewhere, you charge for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 12 minutes, and you've got enough for the next 300 to 400 kilometers. And the problem is that somebody, I saw a video once, somebody said, if you charge a car at a 300 kilowatt charger, you are using as much power as 300 homes at the same time. Except those homes might be spread over a huge area. You are at this point trying to put out a lot, and no grid in the world was designed for that. So we have to get past those constraints, and really the only answer for charging in the countryside, in rural areas, is that you have to generate the power yourself. There's just no way that we can even afford the money that we would have to go to strengthen the backbone to provide charging is fast enough for customers to enjoy the experience unless you generate the power yourself.
I think also to add to that, car rentals is quite a good example, because again it kind of falls into both of our spheres. So a car rental company has the vehicles as an asset that they're renting. As you go to the airport, you rent out the vehicle. So they might be managing and charging their vehicles there, which is very much like Zimi. And then once they go out and they start roaming and they go, the consumers actually go and use the vehicles, they need access to public charging, right? So kind of plays into both spaces. But one of the things we've seen from commercial companies, especially rentals in Africa, again, is the pricing of the vehicles. So again, if you're thinking of the total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle, the cost savings are driven by the kilometers you're driving, because again, we're seeing 90% savings on fuel, shifting to electric. But the total cost of ownership is driven also by the finance or the lease model, right, on that vehicle. So if that vehicle is, comparatively 50% more expensive than a comparative ICE vehicle, for that fleet, again, that's a big driver of cost, right? So until the vehicle pricing isn't lower, until the availability of certain brands, because people are quite brand loyal as well. Some people, if they drive Isuzu, they just want to buy an Isuzu. So if there's not an electric Isuzu, they're not going to buy one. So I think until the higher number of models are available in the market, companies are going to be a bit apprehensive. We have seen, interestingly enough, also from the Chinese suppliers, a massive amount of vehicles coming in. Recently worked on our latest EV catalog, which is 23 fleet-focused vehicles, so not consumer vehicles, just for fleet and commercial, growing from about 8 vehicles last year, right? And 16 of those vehicles are from Chinese suppliers. So you're seeing this massive influx of the Chinese, seeing that there is this market here. They can come in with a lower price vehicle. Again, for fleets, that's absolutely fine, because again, they're going to use that vehicle as an asset. They're going to use it for a couple of years. They're going to switch it out, and they're gaining those benefits of EVs. I'm keen to see that same development in the consumer market, which I don't think we have seen yet.
But Michael, you're so right. I mean, if you look around you now, if you look at the number of Chinese ICE vehicles, it's unbelievable how successful. So I think they're going to use, if they were that successful in the petrol market, they're going to take that as if they were unsuccessful, that'd be one thing, but they've been so successful. I mean, you just see it's like every fourth car now is a Chinese car, and I think that's going to embolden them, because once they come with electric cars, they will take market share away that the other guys will never get back. But I just want to say one more thing. The other thing you've got to keep in mind is that electric, Michael's saying, electric vehicles is not a static thing. Batteries are getting larger, chargers are getting bigger and faster, and all that. What that's saying to you is there's always going to be more demand for more power, and a battery doesn't. Even when people say, okay, you can drive a much longer distance, the batteries don't make the power; they just store the power. So I'm saying an obvious thing, but the point is, you still have to get if you're going to put 600 kilowatts into a battery, or 300 or whatever it is, it's still got to get in there, and the slower you charge, it now becomes unfeasibly long to charge. If you're charging at home with 3 or 4 kilowatts an hour, and you've got to put 400 kilowatts into your car, that's 100 hours. How are you going to manage it? I can't even do 6 hours without being interrupted. So the in both our fields, the demand for power will just increase. The demands of the cars and the trucks and the batteries will increase, and it's very important but the number of locations that can charge won't increase at the same number because they have such specific power demand. So there's a very big first mover advantage in this market that is very powerful, and will allow you to also, you will have the best data, but it's a very important thing to be a first mover, I think, in this field.
So we talked about challenges of being a first mover, but both of you have certainly done market research and tested lots of MVPs and made lots of iterations. How do you continue to make sure that you stay first mover and about the competition that may come up?
Yeah, I think for us, again, we work so closely with our customers on their problems, right? Like, again, even though we're very bullish on EVs and on renewables, etc., we want to make sure that we're tailoring our products and services to what they actually need, right? So what does the fleet actually need? They need to be able primarily to save costs. Like, that's the biggest driver for them. Secondary to that is sustainability. I don't know if you've experienced the same types of sentiments in the market, but that's important, right? Like, you have to be cognizant of you're working with a business, and one of the main drivers for a business is understanding how to lower costs. And when running an ICE fleet, you have very few mechanisms actually to reduce cost, right? So some of them try to do bulk negotiations with, for example, petrol suppliers, or they might use tracking systems to adjust driver behavior to be a bit more sustainable, but you get marginal gains, right? So EVs really are the only way in which they can see substantial cost savings, right, with making a switch. And then again, for them, it's a bit of a paradigm shift, right? So a lot of it's around education, and I think there's a benefit to that. So we use a lot of the customer inputs and the customer feedback sessions to actually work on how do we educate our market, how do we promote EVs in a way that they understand how to use it, that the drivers know how to use it, that they know what range is, that they know what a public charging station is, that they know how to use it, etc. And I've actually, because I follow a lot of your material as well, you also do a lot of work in actually educating the market and getting them to just understand how it works, right? It is a bit of a paradigm shift for people, but as soon as it clicks, it's much better. It's a better experience, right? So for the drivers and the feedback we've gotten from them, they prefer the vehicles usually because they're automatic, right? They make less noise, right? If you're driving the whole day and it's your job, like, less noise is better working conditions. So I think, in terms of like making sure we stay on the cutting edge, we just work with our customers really closely and really take their feedback to heart and make sure that all those stakeholders' feedback is really built into our products on a weekly basis, like it happens constantly.
I think something people underestimate, and Michael said it a couple of times, and we've also experienced it, is there's a surprisingly big software component to our businesses. So we've built a back end, he's built a back end, and what a back end gives you is number one is a lot of data, but number two, it gives you immediately kind of a network effect, because our back end can talk to his back end, right? And now there's potentially a seamless journey for the customer. Customer doesn't really care, but So I think that what you will also find, you asked what first move advantage. I think the cell phone comes as an example where if you're number 3 or number 4, it just becomes harder and harder and harder. So if you're number 1 and number 2 in your market, you've got a good chance of longevity and building out a product. And because you've got a big base, plus you've got the software, you've got the knowledge. I think if you come later, I mean, what may happen is that you know how the petrol companies, for example, people often say to me, aren't the fuel companies your biggest competitor? I'm sure you hear the same thing. No, the point is, actually they're not, because they are so focused on their business, which they do really well, that they are not really interested in this. And worldwide the experience has been that they will come and buy a network or come and buy a system rather than build it themselves because it's so different to their business. And they kind of know that their business can, China reached peak oil recently, which is phenomenal if you think about that. So if that's true in China, which is the biggest country in the world, second biggest country in the world, that's going to be true for a lot of countries quite soon. So I think there's going to be eventually a lot of competition, and you're going to find the carbon fuel businesses are going to want to buy into this business, and that's when it's going to get really interesting because it's going to be very hard for them to start from scratch, or if not impossible. And it's not that they're not clever or hardworking or got lots of money. It's just that I think that there are structural problems in trying to start a new business when you've got a big different kind of business.
You also mentioned education when it comes to consumers specifically. So is it creating that awareness and also telling them, okay, cool, this is the benefits of switching to EV, this is what it's going to do for you? Is it just that, or is it also maybe going first principles and explaining what the technology is? What does it entail?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? So I think when we work with a customer from the get-go, we take a very consulting type of mindset. So really trying to understand their business, understanding how they're operating right now, right before they, not even before they start using electric vehicles. Just understand like what their challenges are, right? And then from there, when we work with them on specifically the pilot models, it is a lot about what type of vehicles are available, how far do these vehicles drive, what is an AC charger, what's a DC charger, what does it mean for the supply of energy at your location? Do you have enough energy at your location? For the drivers, it's how do you charge your car? How does it work? How do you actually interact with the charger? So a lot of that's actually built into that process. And then as they scale, making sure that they have really beautiful and informative material available for drivers and for location managers as they scale it up. I think again, you do a bit more work, I think, on the public relations side and getting people to understand also the infrastructure and where things are at. But I think you've also been doing a great job at informing people with like your newsletter and your marketing material. So yeah, I think it's a bit of both.
I think it's also what we're both trying to do is to do what the government is not doing, which is to provide some leadership in the industry. So that means you've got to put yourself out there, you've got to put your business out there, you've got to force yourself into the conversation. So for example, you'll see now with the white paper and with the RP coming out, the electricity plan coming out. When before we wouldn't really not pay attention to it, but now we're a bit more organized. We comment. We put graphs out there, we put data out there, and boom, gets picked up. So now suddenly you're part of the conversation, and it's no country in the world is actually that big, but most places, decision makers, they're just half a dozen or a dozen decision makers. So if you can quite easily actually force yourself to that conversation. Once you're in the conversation, you're able to start influencing. So I think for us the challenge is to actually start influencing events around us and influencing perceptions. Explain to people who make decisions about policy that there's an alternative. The point that we made with the RP was that what the RP is, obviously.
No, please explain.
What's a good way to explain that? I think it's the integrated resource plan. So it's a big document the government puts out every 3 or 4 years, which is essentially summarizes the energy requirement for the next 50 years, 40 years, till 2050 is what's 20 years, 25 years. And it has very detailed things about how much electricity will be used, where it's going to come from, what the patterns are. But now, for example, in this RP, even though people did a lot of research, they completely underestimated the impact of electric vehicles on the grid. And that's a international thing. The shift from oil to electricity is going to require an additional 12 to 50 to 20% of electricity capacity to drive the cars, because all the energy that came from oil has got to come from the grid. And very few countries have realized how big that is. So one of our points we made with the RP was you can plan that in. In fact, you plan into concepts. You really say how it's going to be. It's much higher than we think it's going to be. But you can alleviate the problem by taking it off grid, which is a really obvious solution. So in that way, we're in the conversation, and it makes a big difference.
I think you've made me think of something now which I think is so important, and yeah, there's definitely a lot of education and awareness and training that gets associated with our businesses, but what we're also trying to tell people is that it's inevitable. Like, it's being regulated. It's becoming illegal to buy an ICE vehicle in the next 50 years in most countries. from many governments, right? It's not an option anymore, really. It is something that we have to take into consideration. And if you're thinking of long-term energy planning, I mean, one of the failings for the past 15 or 20 years for us was that we didn't adequately plan just for our national usage of electricity. So now you're taking out this, maybe potentially a fifth of the demand from an industry that is inevitable. You're going to run into constraints. You're going to run into issues again. So I think, again, it's something that is inevitable and something that people should be actively working on.
You wanting to make this impact, but also profitability. How do you find that balance between making sure that, especially being capital intensive business, making sure that returns to investors are in the pipeline?
No, you can ask Michael. It is the last. If you look at the Fortune magazine published this thing called the Fortune 500, which was the biggest 500 companies in the world, in the US and in the world.
Yes.
And if you they did it every 5 years. And if you take a bunch of fortunes of 5 years ago, you will be astonished by the turnover and which constitutes the biggest, let's say, 20 companies in the world in the US, except for one constant. All the energy companies were there. Mobil was always there. Exxon was always there. Texaco was always there. Shell was always there. BP was always there. So you have to. I think what people forget is how big a business energy is, and how important it is to the world. So the fact is that we're really replacing that kind of business, and also it's inherently a very profitable business. So it's like, but it's like a lot of us, as I said earlier, there's a lot of green businesses are very investment friendly. They give good returns. They are inherently profitable, especially if you're a first mover. So the economic case is often the easiest case to make. The problem is that because people can't see enough of the cars, they think it's going to be a long time. And when you show people, when we have a graphic, we got so desperate to explain this to people that we developed a graphic which showed when manufacturers would actually stop making combustion engine cars. And if you then take back how long it takes to develop a car, you realize that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, most manufacturers switched their business irreversibly to electric. And once you realize the car's just going to be coming, you change your mindset. So once we have to educate people that once we convince people of that, the whole attitude to the conversation changed.
Yeah, I think for us again, like climate tech is amazing, right? It's an amazing opportunity in lots of spheres, right? Outside of EVs as well. Like working in climate is really, it's something that's profit for purpose, right? Like we think of ourselves as a business, and to be sustainable, we also have to have a sustainable business to make that impact. So we really think of it from that perspective. And again, in the ways that we think about sustainability, we try to build it also into our product line, right? So with Zimi Carbon, we try to show verified carbon tracking to fleets, right? So that when they track certain vehicles on the grid, they'll see that they're not making a big difference. They might actually be making a worse impact than their ICE vehicles, right? And that again opens up conversations for things like, are you thinking about other vehicles? Are you thinking about renewable energy? Again, helping them to make the shift also to having more renewable supply. So I think in terms of how we build our products, it's always sustainability focused, right? It's always thinking about how do we make this business more sustainable? How do we make sure that their carbon footprint is lower? And how do we make that really visible to them to help drive those decisions?
In our case, the really special thing about our business is that it's by definition a rural business. So without really, we knew it, but we didn't think about it as a primary purpose. But I was on a radio program the other day, and there was a lament about how hard it is to develop things in the countryside and how countries become more and more urban, but actually you would actually like more and more people to live a better life in rural areas. And we, in our business, we will invest around 100 million rand every 10 years in an area and create, quite a significant number of jobs, permanent jobs, technical jobs, convenience store jobs, all kinds of jobs, security. That just it wasn't there before. And when we launched our first station in the northwest province of Volmarsdal, it was so gratifying to meet the local councillors, the local people, because they were just so unused to that. They were just so unused to somebody coming there and actually investing in their area and becoming a local business. And it was very special. So for us, I feel a bit like Michael. It's a very special business to be involved in because it really can be transformative on so many levels.
What are your plans for growth in the coming months?
we want to continue our work to permit our sites. We want to construct between 40 and 60 sites over the next year, which will be if we get to that, we will have half a national network, and it'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I think on our side, it's on the one side with our existing customers, helping them to continue scaling up EVs. So with the ones that have been piloting with us and have been seeing successful results, getting them to continue scaling that up. And also meeting more customers and introducing them to electric vehicles and what that can do for their fleets. And then in parallel with that, also doing lots of product releases, right? So we do a lot of product development, some of our new software systems being released, some of our new product lines being released, and yeah, some exciting partnerships.